Why is it never Epic's fault? And Apple may be getting into the race. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by the MacVoices Slack, available to all patrons of MacVoices. Sign up today at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. The MacVoices Live panel finishes up our conversation about whining CEOs who blame Apple for their own problems. Then we look at the benefits of Apple taking on Formula One racing for Apple TV+. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking. But in that world, Jim, if you do that, somebody else would have stepped in and tried to do something, whether it would have been, God help us, Microsoft or some other operating system.
Microsoft did step in. They tried and failed. Yeah, Apple crushed Microsoft. So
yeah,
we lived that that reality.
And then there was Rubenstein with whatever that company was that had all sorts of fast web apps on their phone. So and then there was Amazon that had its Fusion phone. So there's been all sorts of other companies that have tried and failed.
I guess the Microsoft thing, though, I felt like that was, first of all, it was a bit ham-handed, as I recall, and it was a little bit too late to the game, and Google was already pouring the money in and becoming the second tier. It'd be interesting to go back and see a timeline of that, but and Microsoft, just folded their 10 left. So,
because they had to. I'm not saying this is a guarantee that, but it's certainly plausible that without Google's investment, Apple could have crushed everyone and permanently, or for a couple of decades owned, look, Microsoft's still coasting on, Windows 95, basically, right? 20 years later, that's the only reason why there's any Microsoft anything.
Barry in the chat room asks, wasn't Android in development before the iPhone? Weren't Android phones more like
Blackberries?
Blackberries, yeah. Blackberries with physical keyboards until then?
Yep. And there was an Android project. It didn't really look like what it looks like now. It was a completely different kind of project. And then the iPhone came out and they did that's where we need to go. But, that was possible because Google had, essentially infinite revenue resources to pour into that. They were way behind Apple, but they, managed to successfully copy Apple and, kind of like you were talking about Microsoft.
Ben, what was the OS that was running on? I think I've got the name right. The Trello.
Yep, the Palm OS.
Was that a Palm OS?
Oh God, not Palm. It was from Palm, but it's got my dad's TV was running it.
WebOS.
WebOS.
Yes,
WebOS. Because I remember that was coming on as the dominant, the up and coming smartphone, if you will, until the iPhone hit. Because I remember I was looking for something better, and when all the rumors started about an iPhone, I did not spend the money on the Trello, but that was going to be where I was going to go. And then, of course, the iPhone hit, and the rest is history. So
iPhone crushed all of those. It even crushed BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Look at that. You'd think, you talk about potential competitors, you would think, well, BlackBerry was the company that was in the position to own that market. They did own that market, and Apple just crushed them.
Took it.
Yeah. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Microsoft interview about after the release of the announcement of the iPhone and the pricing and how they just scoffed at it. And,
well, what else were they going to do?
Yeah, but it was the way they did it, Jim. Come on.
There's a reason why Satya Nadella is in charge and not Steve Ballmer.
Yeah. Well, that's one of many.
Yeah.
Hey, let's move on because we're starting to run a little short on time, and there are a couple more that I wanted to get to, but we're going to stay with the theme here for a second, and just mention the epic Fortnite layoffs. It just seems like all of Apple's enemies, are engaged in damage control or something, or complaining. And I don't know, Mark, if you have any thoughts on this one, except just to say that Epic, you wouldn't have to lay off people if you hadn't spent all the money on the legal fees.
So when I saw that, so their competitor Unity, who Apple mentioned in their June event, and their stock went up, and Unity, went public, if I recall correctly, in I think late 20. And then, sort of got a jolt in the fall of 2021 when investors thought, oh, these guys have like a monopoly position. All the gaming companies and, even movie 3D companies and effects are going to be using their rendering engine. So this is a great buy. So their stock went up, and then, it's been collapsing for basically, 18 months. They're not profitable. And, we can talk about some of the problems that their business has. The key sin is they're not profitable. So I can't imagine that, Epic, is, Epic, if they were able to go public, they would have, following Unity. They didn't do that. So my sense is they're overextended, and in the current environment now, it's, near impossible, for, companies to raise additional money. So Epic is deciding, hey, we've got to grab our butts and hold on. So they're laying off people, and they're selling some operating unit, all to try to stem cash flow or generate some cash, because cash is blood to a company, and if you run out of cash, no matter how good your products are, you die. And even growing companies, if they grow and they run out of cash and they're successful, they die. So I suspect there's a little bit of, oh my God, oh my God, what do we do here? We're running into a bad situation going on at Epic. And, I'm not happy, that, if people get laid off and lose their jobs, but, it's a business reality that, unless you are profitable, you can't, you don't control your destiny.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point, Mark. It's difficult to raise money in this environment. I have to wonder in what environment it would be. If I were an investor, would I want to invest in Fortnite? Not on one hand, their products and their audience seem to be pretty dedicated. On the other hand, some of their senior management seems to be of questionable judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, would I want to invest in that with all the other options out there? I'm not so sure.
And the same way I feel about Unity. I've looked at them, and they're particularly, to me, pernicious from a investor standpoint, because over the past 3 or 4 reporting periods, so a sequence of 3 years, they've inflated their shares outstanding by about 26-27%. And I can only imagine they're doing that to either fund stupid acquisitions that they're unwinding now, or they're awarding it as grants to their employees. But that's basically bad behavior. That's robbing from their investors. And you compare that with other companies that we've talked about here that do have large use of stock options as compensation. Company like Netflix, if you look at it, they only grow their shares outstanding by 1 to 2% a year. So I think Unity, they're losing money. That's a bad business, and and they're robbing from their investors. So I think this whole space has some structural problems, and we'll have to see what develops and what emerges.
Yeah, and structure is the one thing that the register that it is not mentioning here, and it's vitally important. Why many people keep talking about the Fortnite product, Epic is not only Fortnite. Epic is Unreal Engine.
Right.
And Unreal Engine powers most of the major 3D games and non-game technologies in various industries. If this company were to go down, it would have huge ripples elsewhere.
But I don't think it will go down. What will happen is it has financial stress. Some shrewd investor or private equity firm or company will acquire it. They'll boot. They'll boot out. They'll review and they'll boot out. The bad parts in the management team, and then they'll refocus them and recapitalize them.
Yeah, but we saw that with Unity. Something similar happened to that, and it led.
Well, it's always a tough bet, right? If you want to bet on the future and you make bets, and they don't always all work out.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, right now the third party game industry, and we're not talking about EA or other companies that are rich enough to have their own internal game engines, but Unreal Engine and Unity is basically a duopoly right now.
That's right. And that's why in 2021, there was so much investor excitement behind Unity. They're thinking, that not only do they do this, is use all these games and we have all these annuities, and it's used in Hollywood production and, all sorts of other things. And this is going to be great. It's going to grow. This tree will grow to the moon until it didn't.
Yeah.
Well, there's one last story I want to make sure we get to, and it contains the headline I'm typing in from the edition contains a word that I don't like when we talk about these things, and that is may. Apple may enter a race for Formula One rights.
I talked to Charlotte about this.
Yes, exactly, and I know Webb has some background in this in a sense. So, Webb, you want to dive in on this and give us some things to think about?
Just to cover, first of all, just as a foundation, I'm a fan. I'm a Formula One racing fan, have been for years. I've been all over this planet going to races all over Europe. Haven't been to the Far East yet. Haven't been to Brazil yet, but I've been to several races here in the United States too. So I'm coming at this as a fan. There are a couple of things that I find interesting. If you remember, Apple has always had an interest. They have an interest in sports to begin with, the MLS and all that other kind of stuff that we already know about, and Major League Baseball. But the Formula One thing is kind of interesting. A couple things that, if you remember, there was a race earlier this year in Miami, and Tim Cook waved the checkered flag, not with a whole lot of energy, I might add, but he kind of did one of these, and Eddie Q, is, I've said this on the show several times, he's on the board of directors of Ferrari, the car company. So there's always been an interest there. One of the things that's interesting about the TV rights in this game is there is it's an international rights, and what Apple wants, and it was referenced in this edition article too. Apple wants worldwide rights, and there are several countries that have their own licensing agreement with Formula One. If Apple wanted to get into this game, it'd probably be about 5 years once they come to an agreement. It's going to be 5 years, if not maybe 7 years, to get that worldwide licensing agreement. So it's not going to happen all at once. Also keep in mind that in Formula One, it already has a lot of money. It is, I mean, you think NBA players get paid a lot. And the Formula One, you got everything from drivers that are paid tens of millions of dollars to drive around in a race car, all the way to the other end. You got people that pay to drive a race car. It's it's a wide gamut of what goes on as far as the drivers. The $2 billion, is it going to happen? It could. As a fan, what I would like to see is they have to do something to make the broadcast a little bit more intriguing. They tried to do it in the United States, where ESPN and Speed Channel before that they tried to broadcast the race, but they had two guys sitting in a studio in Connecticut doing the play-by-play of the race. It was all over the world and just picking up the world feed to do it on about a 30-second delay. And that didn't work out. The last couple of years, what ESPN did is that they've contracted with Sky Sports, which is basically the ESPN of Europe. And they just pick up that feed. They don't have the production costs. So there's that going on. Also remember, Formula One is actually owned by a United States company now.
Liberty Media.
And they're trying to get, there was only one race per country. Now the United States is bouncing on three. There was Miami, there's Austin, and there's Las Vegas, which could be an interesting race. There's a side story there about the Las Vegas race, that the Formula One people are insisting that the hotels pay a fee if they're on the race course. Okay. And if they don't, Formula One's just going to put a big black tarp right in front of the hotel so people can't get a room and watch the race in their hotel room. Seriously. I mean, that's how ruthless these people are. So there's lots of things. Like I said, as a fan, they got to do something that's very intriguing to pick it up. I think one thing that's interesting recently is that if I'm watching the Thursday night football, the ES or the Amazon game, they have a feed that brings on all the AWS analytics, and that's real fascinating. So if they can do something like that and add it to the Formula One, that could be interesting. Now, I haven't seen anything on the baseball broadcasts or the soccer broadcasts either. I got to admit, I haven't studied them, but I don't know if they're doing anything that's any different than any other soccer game on TV. So that's kind of my thoughts. It'll be interesting. It'll be a while if they get to it. $2 billion is a lot of money, but they're just going to take some of that Google money and put it over there. So,
I have a question for you after dark about AWS and football.
Okay.
And I have a Formula One story that will take even just direct point to point.
Yeah. Oh, Brian brought up a really good point. The Vision Pro and how that could play into the F1 thing could be really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that might be a lot easier to do than some of the immersive, the football immersive stuff. So I'm sorry, Ben, go ahead.
There's a couple things here. Number one, Formula One does meet Apple's goal of international appeal. And the other thing, there has been exactly one major market that Formula One has traditionally struggled in: the United States.
Not for the last 3 years.
Not for the last 3 years, but there has been trepidation within the Formula One good old boys towards the United States, and trepidation historically with the United States public favoring internal forms of motorsports. For Liberty Media, which is, like Webb said, a United States company, gaining a larger foothold within the United States and maybe doing it in a broadcast style that meets what American racing viewers are looking for, would be something that would be very, very intriguing to both Liberty Media and Apple.
A couple of things that's worth noting. One of the other things that's going on with Formula One is that there technically is an American team. Gene Haas, Haas Racing, in IndyCar, it was Newman Haas, Paul Newman, and was involved. The other thing that's going on was that the FIA has agreed to allow Michael Andretti and Andretti Cadillac Racing, or Andretti and General Motors,
Andretti Autosport,
to come in, But it's like you said, Ben, it's the old boys network and all the other team owners, what they call the Concord Agreement, the governing body of who gets to come in and who doesn't is controlled by the teams themselves. And that's really interesting. So Andretti's trying to come in. So there's another American component here that I think they're trying to get some traction on.
Yeah. And the other part about that, there has been rumors that Haas F1, which is of course a sister company to Stewart Haas Racing in NASCAR, may be talking with their NASCAR manufacturer Ford about getting back into Formula One, which would also increase that American component of the sport and potentially get more views, which again would make it more attractive to Apple.
And the one thing too about this, and Webb, to your point, could be 5 years, could be 7 years after they come to an agreement. That just feels very Apple-like. That instead of just throwing, oh my God, money at it today and trying to score, and they've had to do that in a couple cases, but it just feels like this is one of those where we can cultivate the relationship. Meanwhile, we're developing our technology and we can bring some ideas to the table that others can't or have not so far. Mm-hmm. So it just feels like a very Apple play to me. And Ben's point about a worldwide audience is a great one. I think this is going to be very interesting to watch.
But they got to have the worldwide rights to go with it, and that's going to be tough. Mm-hmm. That's going to be tough for Apple to pull off.
Yeah, but then they may nibble at it, and they may just try to knock off, a little bit at a time. So let's see. So
how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Cletus and I have been,
Cletus and I have been having an interesting little back and forth here about the percentage of the MacVoices audience that are sports fans and what we would consider ourselves fans of. And I think it's probably safe to say that maybe we all have one or two sports that we pay attention to. I don't know that we're super diehard about more than maybe one at a time, but I'm not sure we're the target audience for a sports programming.
Yeah, can't be high.
Yeah. But on the other hand, Apple doesn't want to be just seen as a tech company. Clearly, they want to be an entertainment company. So, guys, we're pretty much over time, but this was a great discussion. Thank you all very much. I know we had a couple of members, Brian and Eric, notably, that were very quiet tonight. So I'm not sure if they're just being stoic or what. Maybe they were just tired. They're not going to say anything. They're still not going to say anything.
Your tie's tied up too tight.
Eric, if you're talking, you're muted. Maybe that's why you've been quiet all night. You forgot to.
I've been saying this all night long, and nothing went through. A little bit tired, and a little bit. It's sort of. Yeah, there are a few sport things that are interesting, but what I'm really waiting for is to see where Apple starts doing, stereo recording, doing 3D imagery of. I'm less interested in the sport. I'm more interested in the technology used to capture it. That I think could be really exciting. And it's going to take a while. There are lots of possibilities there. And so, I'm excited that they're looking at sports. I hope they look at more of them, but with enough control to be able to roll out some really new way of viewing them and experiencing them. That I am really looking forward to.
I was going to add too that I think even Apple's small foray so far into sports, they've been learning from their own mistakes and making steps going forward. I do watch some Friday Night Baseball from Apple, and it's completely a 100% better experience this past season for Major League Baseball than it was last season.
It was horrible last season.
They had
season 1 was rough as hell.
Yeah, they had commentators that weren't dialed into the game. Last year, it was not so good, and this year is much better. But one thing that has continued, I think, from both last season to this season, I think I like that they have a very Apple-esque clean interface to to the overlays that are on the games. They have good. It was brought up earlier with the AWS next gen stats and that Amazon does with the Thursday night. They kind of similar type things with Apple. It's good. I mean that type of stuff is good, and they're learning.
Yeah. Apple has kind of taken the traditional elements they needed and put it into their broadcast, while being new and fresh at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing to watch. More thing to watch.
Literally.
Yeah. Let's go around the room and let folks know where they can find you, and then we're going to get out of here and go to After Dark. So I'm just going to keep the order the way we started out. And David, that means you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts, especially on the browsers. Some interesting points there that I'm not sure I knew enough about because I don't play with Windows that much. Where can folks
I wish I
connect with
didn't,
you?
but I do. Yes, you can find me at In Touch with iOS at intouchwithios.com. YouTube channel is youtube.com/intouchwithios. I'm here on Tuesdays. I'm on the Mac show on the British Tech Network on Fridays. And I'm on Mastodon at DayG65 at mastodon.club. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Jim Ray, thank you so much for sharing the developer's perspective tonight. We spent a lot of time on that, but it was a great discussion. Where can folks connect with you? You're muted, Jim. They're not going to be able to know. They're not going to be able to connect.
You cannot connect with me. Yeah, sorry about that. On the internet at provue.com, PROVUE.com, or on Mastodon at ProvueJim, same spelling, at techhub.social.
Thank you, Jim. Always good to have you. Brian Flanigan-Arthurs, please pull your tie down a little bit. Let a little blood flow to the brain so we can hear more from you next time. Where can folks connect with you?
All right. So the best place to reach me is Mastodon, Brian8944 at mastodon.cloud. Also available on Spoutable, Blue Sky, and X at Brian8944.
Thank you, Brian. Great to have you.
Hey, great to be here.
Eric Bolden, thank you for being here, even if you are a little tired. We appreciate you showing up. Where can we find you?
I am found mostly on Mastodon at EA Bolden at techhub.social and EA Bolden at mes.tl.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Webb Bixby already unloosened his tie in anticipation of my comments. Well, thanks so much. Hope you feel better and are back to full speed next week. Where can folks connect with you?
Well, I'll be on the Mastodon bandwagon tonight. So it's Webb Bixby at Mastodon and Webb Bixby at twit.social. It's probably the best way to find me that way.
Great. Good to have you, Webb.
Thank you.
Ben Roethig, thank you so much for being here, even without a tie, just being casual tonight. Where can folks find you? You're muted, Ben.
And I was muted when I told you were muted, so it was a double mute.
But anyway, you can find me on the Blue X Spout thread, blah blah blah, whatever. Don. There's probably new ones that came up while I was doing this. It's at Ben Roethig on that social media of choice. You can find my writings at roethig.tech. On Thursdays, you can find me on In Touch with iOS, or at least most Thursdays, you can find me on In Touch with iOS with Mr. David Ginsburg. Thursday and Friday mornings, depending where you are. You can find me at the British Tech Network on their Big and Mac shows. Unfortunately, that they have not combined those into food. And of course, most Tuesdays you can find me here on Mac Voices.
Thank you, Ben.
With that Chuck Joyner guy.
Yeah, I don't know who he is. Mark Fuccio, thank you for, as always, a very timely background and for all the
welcome.
business insights tonight. Where can folks connect with you? Because I know they want to connect with you.
Okay, the easiest place is X at Mark Fuccio, MarkFuccio, all one word. Or you might try maybe Mark Fuccio or M Fuccio at twit.social. So haven't been there for a while. It's kind of a lonely place, but Webb mentioned it, so I figure I'd toss it out there too, and we'll see what happens.
Great. Thank you. Folks, this is Mac Voices Live. We do this Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time that is, wherever you are. So mark your calendars, tell your smart assistant, your smart speaker, whatever, to remind you to join us next week at that time. YouTube.com/MacVoicesTV. We do this every week, and it is always insightful and a whole lot of fun. We'd love to have you join us. Especially want to thank the chat room tonight. We had a lot of different conversations going back and forth. I tried to pull them in whenever possible, but there was just a lot going on. So until next time, and I should say, sorry, this will be lightly edited and added to the Mac Voices feeds eventually, with all the links that I couldn't post in the chat rooms tonight. So sorry about that. We'll work that one out. With that, thanks so much. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.